Jack Harper's hands tightened around the controls as his spacecraft approached Earth's atmosphere. It had been 5 long years since he disappeared on what was supposed to be a routine mission to chart the far edges of the solar system. His name had long been etched into the list of missing astronauts, assumed dead, lost to the vastness of space. But now, against all odds, he was returning. As the craft shuddered under the pressure of re-entry, Jack glanced over at the 2 figures beside him, Zara and Alara, both Amazonian warriors, their faces calm but their bodies strained by the weight of pregnancy. The journey had taken its toll, and they were both heavily pregnant, nearing the end of their terms. "We're almost there," Jack murmured, his voice steady despite the chaos of their descent. Zara, her sharp eyes locking with his, gave a small nod. "Earth," she said softly, the unfamiliar word tasting strange in her mouth. "Your world." Alara, slightly younger but just as fierce, rested a hand on her swollen belly. "Will they accept us?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the fear Jack knew lay beneath her composed exterior. Jack swallowed, his gaze flicking to the planet growing larger in the window. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'll make them." The spacecraft broke through the final layer of the atmosphere, and Earth's sprawling blue oceans and green continents stretched before them like a promise. A homecoming Jack had never thought he'd see. But this was no ordinary return. He wasn't just coming back to Earth, he was bringing 2 alien wives, both carrying his children. As the ship neared the designated landing zone, alarms blared, signaling the proximity of military vessels. Jack's return had been detected. The landing would not go unnoticed. "Here we go," Jack muttered as the craft landed with a heavy thud, the ground shaking beneath them. The hatch opened and Jack stepped out first, blinking in the bright sunlight. The recovery team, clad in military uniforms, stood frozen at the sight of him. Their expressions quickly turned from surprise to confusion as Zara and Alara stepped out behind him, their tall, imposing figures undeniable. They wore warrior garments, their alien forms elegant and strong, their bulging bellies a testament to the life they carried within. Jack raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "I need medical attention for them, now." The soldiers remained frozen for a beat longer before springing into action, their radios buzzing with frantic communication. The world had believed Jack Harper was lost, but no one had expected him to return like this. The medical team, hastily dispatched by the recovery unit, rushed forward, but they hesitated when faced with Zara and Alara. The Amazonians stood proud and defiant, their warrior instincts still intact despite their condition. Jack could feel the tension mounting. His wives were not ordinary women, and Earth was not prepared for their arrival. Jack stepped forward, placing himself between the medics and the Amazonians. "They're pregnant," he said sharply, his tone brooking no argument. "And they need medical care now." The lead medic, a woman in her 40s with graying hair, finally broke through the shock and stepped closer, nodding. "We've prepared a facility nearby. We'll take them there." Zara and Alara exchanged glances, then nodded to Jack, silently trusting him to guide them through this unfamiliar world. As they were escorted into the waiting transport, Jack could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Every camera in the vicinity was pointed at them, every eye watching with a mixture of awe, confusion, and fear. The ride to the medical facility was silent, tension thick in the air. Jack sat between Zara and Alara, holding each of their hands as the transport moved swiftly through the city. The streets were packed with onlookers, people staring in disbelief at the sight of 2 pregnant alien women riding alongside the missing astronaut they had thought long dead. "They're frightened," Alara said softly, her keen gaze observing the crowds through the tinted windows. "Curiosity and fear are close cousins," Zara added, her voice steady. "But they will learn." Jack squeezed their hands. "They'll have to." When they arrived at the medical facility, a team of doctors was waiting, their expressions a blend of professionalism and barely contained excitement. They had never seen anything like this. As they examined Zara and Alara, they marveled at their physiology, their strength, their resilience. The pregnancies, while similar in many ways to human gestation, also carried unique challenges. Jack stayed by their side through every test and consultation, refusing to leave them alone for even a moment. Reporters camped outside, desperate for any information. News of Jack's return and the startling revelation that he was not alone had sparked a media storm unlike anything seen before. Speculation ran rampant. How had he survived? Who were these alien women? And most intriguingly, what would the children of such a union be like? Inside the sterile walls of the facility, Jack faced a barrage of questions from government officials. They were fascinated by his story, but also deeply wary. How had he survived with these Amazonians? How had their relationship evolved? And most importantly, what did their return mean for Earth? Jack stood firm, making one thing clear above all else. They are not a threat. They are my wives, and I expect them to be treated with the same respect and care any human would receive. It wasn't a demand, it was a promise. Jack had survived impossible odds, and he had returned not as the man he once was, but as a protector of the family he had formed in the stars. No one, human or otherwise, would harm what he had built. As the sun set on their first day back on Earth, Jack stood at the window of the medical facility, watching the city lights flicker to life. Behind him, Zara and Alara rested, their forms bathed in the soft glow of the sterile room. The future was uncertain, but Jack knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning of their journey, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The morning after their arrival, Jack woke to the sound of helicopters buzzing overhead and the dull roar of voices outside the medical facility. He rubbed his eyes and looked at Zara and Alara, still resting. Their pregnancies made them more vulnerable than he liked, and the weight of the world's attention was an added burden he hadn't anticipated. The news channels had latched onto their story with ferocity. Every headline screamed about the lost astronaut's return, with alien wives. The world was captivated, and the speculation was endless. What had really happened out there? What was Jack Harper hiding? And the most pressing question, what would their children be like? Jack watched a broadcast from the facility's TV screen, sitting at the foot of the bed where Zara slept. The anchor, a young woman with wide eyes, spoke urgently as images of his spacecraft's landing played in the background. Captain Jack Harper, missing for 5 years, has returned under shocking circumstances. With him are 2 alien women, believed to be from a race known as the Amazonians. They are heavily pregnant, and sources tell us that Captain Harper is the father of these hybrid children. What does this mean for humanity? What will these children be like? Scientists are scrambling for answers. Jack turned the TV off, feeling a headache forming. This was what he feared. His family being turned into a spectacle, a curiosity for the world to dissect. The mystery surrounding his return had unleashed a storm, and now the world was demanding answers. Zara stirred beside him, her eyes fluttering open. "They're still talking about us?" she asked softly, sensing his unease. Jack sighed and nodded. "They won't stop for a while, but I'll make sure we're protected." Alara, who had been sitting quietly by the window, watching the city's bustle from afar, turned to face them. They're afraid of what they don't understand. Fear is a powerful thing. Jack knew she was right. He had faced that fear himself when he first encountered the Amazonians. Now, humanity was facing its own fears, the unknown, the possibility of life beyond their comprehension. But Jack was determined to shift that fear toward understanding. "I'll talk to the press," Jack said firmly. "We need to control the narrative before someone else does." Zara gave him a small, grateful smile. "We trust you, Jack. You've guided us this far." Alara nodded, her eyes full of resolve. "We face this together." Later that afternoon, Jack stood in front of a sea of reporters, their microphones and cameras trained on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Zara and Alara had remained inside, resting under the watchful eye of the medical team, while Jack faced the media storm alone. The tension in the air was palpable. Flashes from cameras blinded him momentarily, and he took a deep breath, centering himself, before stepping up to the podium. As soon as he did, the reporters erupted with questions. "Captain Harper, how did you survive for 5 years? Are these alien women really your wives? What species are your children going to be? How does it feel to be the first human to father extraterrestrial offspring?" Jack raised a hand, silencing the barrage of questions. "I'll answer your questions, but one at a time. Let me start by saying this. I was lost, yes, but I wasn't alone. Zara and Alara, my wives, saved my life, and we formed a bond during my time on their home planet. What you need to understand is that this isn't just a sensational story for your headlines. This is about family. The crowd was stunned into silence by the sincerity in Jack's voice. For a moment, the relentless flashing of cameras slowed, and the reporters actually listened. I know the idea of human and alien relationships is new, and it's shocking to many of you. But I assure you, Zara and Alara are as much a part of my life as any human spouse would be. They're not here as an invasion or a threat. They're here as mothers and partners. And our children, our daughters, will be a bridge between our worlds. The murmuring grew, but this time it was more curious than accusatory. A reporter from one of the leading networks raised her hand. Captain Harper, how do you plan to integrate your family into society? Are you concerned about backlash or the government's involvement? Jack's expression hardened slightly. I know there are people who will resist this, who are afraid of what they don't know. But we have to move beyond fear if we want to grow as a species. My family is part of the future, and I won't let anyone turn them into an experiment or a sideshow. The government and the public need to understand that. Another reporter spoke up, his voice louder than the rest. But what about the biological implications? What will your children be? Humans or aliens? Jack squared his shoulders, knowing this was the question everyone truly wanted answered. They'll be both. And isn't that something worth celebrating? The fact that two species, once completely alien to each other, can find common ground and even create life together? My daughters will show us that we're not so different after all. The room was silent for a beat. Jack's words hung in the air, challenging the deep-seated fears and biases of those listening. The media had come expecting scandal and sensationalism, but Jack had given them something more: hope, an idea that transcended the immediate shock of his return. As he stepped away from the podium, Jack felt the weight of the world still pressing on his shoulders, but there was also a glimmer of optimism. If he could make the world see his family just an anomaly, if he could make them see Zara and Alara as the loving, powerful women they were, then maybe, just maybe, the future would be brighter for all of them. Back inside the medical facility, Zara and Alara watched the broadcast of Jack's speech. Alara leaned back against the pillows, a soft smile playing on her lips. He speaks well, she remarked, her hand resting on her belly. Zara nodded, her eyes glowing with pride. He's more than a soldier, he's our strength. And for the first time since their arrival, the tension in the air seemed to ease. They were no longer just visitors from another world. With Jack leading the way, they were becoming part of Earth. And whatever the future held, they would face it together. The days following Jack's public address were a whirlwind. While his words had sparked curiosity and even some sympathy from the public, the government's reaction was far less supportive. Officials from various agencies began circling, their interest in Zara and Alara shifting from a cultural curiosity to a matter of national security. Jack had anticipated this, but it still unsettled him. Inside their temporary residence at the secure medical facility, Jack met with several government representatives, who all came with the same underlying concern: the potential threat posed by Zara and Alara's presence on Earth. "We need to assess the full implications of this situation," said General Malcolm Stone, a stern-faced military officer. "Your wives," he said the word with noticeable discomfort, "represent an entirely new species that we have no understanding of. We have to ensure the safety of our planet." Jack, seated across from the group of officials, clenched his fists under the table. "They're not a threat, General. They didn't come here to harm anyone. They're my family." General Stone's steely gaze didn't waver. "That may be so, but their presence could still be seen as an act of aggression by other nations, or even by their own people. We have to proceed with caution." Another official, a diplomat named Sarah Renner, interjected, her tone more measured but equally firm. "Captain Harper, you need to understand the position we're in. There are security risks, biological unknowns, and international concerns. We're not here to separate you from your family, but we do need to ensure there are no unintended consequences." Jack's temper flared, but he held it back, choosing his words carefully. "You're not treating them like people. You're treating them like an experiment." Sarah leaned forward, her gaze softer but still determined. "We don't have a choice, Jack. The world is watching. We need to conduct further tests, and we need them to cooperate. Jack's stomach churned at the thought of Zara and Alara being subjected to more scrutiny. They've already been examined. They've cooperated every step of the way. What more do you need from them? General Stone leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. We need to be sure, Captain. Complete biological and psychological evaluations. Their abilities, their physiology, they could pose risks we haven't even begun to understand. Jack slammed his fist on the table, startling the room into silence. They're carrying my children. Do you really think I would ever put this planet at risk if I thought for a second that Zara or Alara were dangerous? You've seen the tests, the results. They want peace, and they want a future here. That should be enough. The tension in the room crackled, but Sarah Renner finally nodded, her expression thoughtful. We'll see what we can do to limit the extent of the testing. But Jack, you need to prepare yourself. This isn't going away anytime soon. As the officials left, Jack stood by the window, watching their cars drive off. The world saw his family as an unknown variable, a potential threat that needed to be managed. But he saw them for what they truly were. Two strong, courageous women who had given him love and purpose in the depths of space. Zara walked up behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. They don't trust us. They're afraid. Jack muttered, still staring out at the horizon. But I won't let them treat you like lab rats. Alara joined them, her presence always bringing a sense of calm. They will learn, Jack, just as you did, but it will take time. Jack turned to face them, determination burning in his eyes. Then we'll give them time, and we'll show them what kind of future we can build, together. A month later, Zara and Alara's pregnancies reached their final stages. The medical team, which had been closely monitoring them, had grown accustomed to the unique blend of human and Amazonian physiology. The doctors and nurses were fascinated, but more importantly, they had come to respect Zara and Alara as patients, not just as specimens to study. Jack stayed by their side throughout, holding their hands as they prepared for the births of their daughters. The tension from the outside world faded in those moments, replaced by the anticipation and excitement of becoming parents. The night Zara went into labor was quiet, the soft hum of machines the only sound in the dimly lit medical suite. Jack was there, his heart pounding with both fear and excitement as the doctors worked around them. Zara's strength was undeniable, her warrior instincts showing even now, but the physical strain of the birth was clear on her face. Alara, seated beside her, was close to labor herself but focused on supporting her sister, her hand never leaving Zara's. Jack knelt between them, his voice steady as he reassured them both. You've got this. We're almost there. Hours later, a soft cry filled the room. Zara's daughter, a perfect blend of human and Amazonian features, was born into the world. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the nurse handed the baby to Zara, whose eyes glistened with awe as she held her newborn. She's beautiful, Jack whispered, leaning close to kiss Zara's forehead. Zara smiled, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten as she gazed down at her daughter. She's strong. But there was no time to rest. Alara's labor began soon after, and Jack shifted his focus to her, holding her hand tightly as she worked through the pain. The second birth came faster, and soon, another cry filled the room. A second daughter, just as radiant and full of life as her sister. Jack's heart swelled with pride and joy as he cradled both of his daughters, one in each arm, while Zara and Alara rested. Their tiny hands grasped at his fingers, their deep blue eyes, just like their mother's, already full of wonder. The doctors and nurses who had witnessed the historic moment stood back, letting the new family have their time. There was no longer any sense of them being an experiment or a curiosity. In this room, they were simply a family, two mothers, a father, and their children. Jack turned to Zara and Alara, his voice full of emotion. We did it. They're here. Zara, still lying back, smiled softly. Our daughters. Alara, though tired, radiated warmth as she leaned over to touch one of the baby's cheeks. They will change everything. In that moment, Jack knew that his family was not just a symbol of love, but a beacon of hope. They were the bridge between two worlds, and their daughters would grow up in a future that had the potential to be brighter, stronger, and more united than anyone could have imagined. As the first rays of dawn broke through the window, illuminating the room in soft light, Jack, Zara, and Alara shared a quiet, peaceful moment together. The world outside might still be filled with challenges, but inside this room, everything felt perfect. Their daughters were the future, and together, they would shape it. Weeks passed after the birth of Zara and Alara's daughters, and while the family shared moments of peace and joy inside their secure medical residence, the world outside grew more turbulent. The arrival of the two Amazonian women and the birth of hybrid children had ignited fierce debates across the globe, splitting opinions down the middle. Supporters hailed the Harper family as a symbol of unity between species, a glimpse of a future where interstellar relations could be built on mutual respect and love. Others, however, viewed them as a threat, an affront to human purity, and a potential gateway to alien influence on Earth. The media only stoked the flames, amplifying the divide. Jack watched the coverage with a mixture of frustration and sadness. Protests had broken out in several cities, with extremist groups calling for the isolation of Zara, Alara, and their daughters. Meanwhile, advocates for peace and unity rallied in their defense, demanding an end to the xenophobic rhetoric. One evening, Jack sat on the balcony of their residence, gazing out at the night sky. The stars, which once felt like home to him, now seemed distant, a reminder of the life he had left behind. His daughters, both sleeping peacefully inside, were blissfully unaware of the chaos their birth had triggered. Zara joined him, her footsteps soft as she approached. "You're troubled," she said, sitting beside him. Jack nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't expect this level of backlash. I knew people would be scared, but the hatred, it's overwhelming." Zara's gaze remained calm, though her eyes reflected the concern she felt for him. Fear drives people to do terrible things, but fear can also be conquered. "You've already started that journey, Jack. We just need to keep pushing forward." Jack sighed, the weight of the world pressing on him. "I'm just worried about what this means for our daughters. They're the first of their kind, Zara. I don't want them growing up in a world that sees them as something to fear." Alara emerged from inside, joining the conversation. She had always been the quieter of the two sisters, but her strength was undeniable. "They will grow up knowing they are loved," Alara said firmly, her voice steady. "And that love will be stronger than any fear." Jack smiled softly at her words, but the worry didn't fully leave his heart. He leaned back against his chair, looking up at the stars once more. "I just hope the world catches up before it's too late." The night passed quietly, but the tension outside their walls was palpable. Zara and Alara had adjusted to Earth as best they could, but Jack knew they missed their home, their people. Yet they had chosen this life with him, and together they had built something new. The breaking point came when news of a planned rally reached Jack's ears. A radical anti-alien group had organized a protest outside the government building where a diplomatic summit on extraterrestrial relations was set to take place. The summit had been convened in response to Jack's return and the growing calls for clearer policies on interspecies interaction. But with the protest, tensions were bound to boil over. Jack paced back and forth inside their living room, Zara and Alara watching him closely. The news blared in the background, showing images of the crowds gathering, some holding signs in support of the Harper family, others demanding their removal from Earth. "We can't just sit here and watch this unfold," Jack muttered, his frustration evident. "We need to make our voices heard." Zara stepped forward, her posture calm but commanding. "Then let's go." Jack looked at her, surprised. "You're suggesting we walk into the middle of that chaos?" Alara, ever the strategist, nodded in agreement with her sister. "We have been silent for too long, letting others speak for us. It's time we show the world who we are, who we truly are." Jack hesitated. He knew the risks. There would be no guarantee of safety if they went public in such a heated environment. But the thought of staying hidden, of letting fear dictate their actions, gnawed at him. "We'll have to be careful," Jack said, his voice firm. "But you're right. The world needs to see us." The following day, Jack, Zara, and Alara made their way to the summit. Their presence caused an immediate stir, both in the crowd and among the government officials. News crews scrambled to capture the moment, the cameras turning toward the family as they approached the steps of the government building, flanked by security. The protesters fell silent, the tension in the air electric. Jack, holding Zara and Alara's hands, stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the crowd. He could see the mixture of emotions: fear, anger, curiosity, and hope. "I know many of you are afraid," Jack began, his voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. "I was afraid too once. When I first met Zara and Alara, I didn't know what to expect. But what I learned is that we're not so different." He gestured toward his wives, who stood tall beside him, their presence commanding but not threatening. "Zara and Alara are warriors, yes, but they are also mothers, daughters, and now they are part of this world. Our daughters, born from the union of two species, represent a future where we can live and thrive together." A man in the crowd shouted, "What about our safety? How do we know they're not a threat?" Jack's expression remained calm, but his voice took on a firmer tone. "Fear makes us see threats where there are none. I've lived with Zara and Alara. They've protected me, saved my life more times than I can count. They're not here to harm anyone." Alara stepped forward, her voice calm but full of conviction. "We came here because of Jack. We chose this path, and now we choose to stand with him, to build a future where our children don't grow up with fear in their hearts." Zara's voice joined her sister's. "We will not be driven by hatred. We seek peace, not war." The crowd was silent, processing the gravity of their words. Some still held signs of protest, their faces twisted in distrust, but others began to lower their signs, their expressions softening. The atmosphere shifted, the tension easing, if only slightly. One of the reporters stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Captain Harper, what do you hope to achieve here today?" Jack took a deep breath, glancing at Zara and Alara before turning back to the reporter. "We want to show the world that fear doesn't have to define us. My family represents the future, not just for humanity, but for everyone in the galaxy. A future where we can work together, where love and understanding can bridge the gaps between our worlds." The reporter nodded, visibly moved by Jack's words. "And what do you say to those who still fear this union?" Jack's response was simple, yet powerful. "Fear is a natural reaction to the unknown. But we can't let it rule us. It's time for the world to move forward." As the press conference ended, Jack felt a sense of hope begin to bloom in his chest. The crowd remained divided, but the tide was turning. Slowly, the world was beginning to see what Jack, Zara, and Alara had always known. That together, they could forge a future where differences weren't something to fear, but something to embrace. And with their daughters as the bridge between two worlds, that future was closer than ever. Tensions reached their peak in the days following Jack, Zara, and Alara's public appearance. While many people were moved by their words and saw the hope in their family's message, others became more entrenched in their fear and anger. The anti-alien protests escalated, and even the government's efforts to calm the situation seemed insufficient. For every person who saw unity in Jack's family, there were those who saw only a threat to humanity's way of life. Jack had anticipated resistance, but the intensity of it shocked him. Threats flooded in, some directed at him, but more dangerously at Zara, Alara, and their children. He doubled security around their home, but the worry gnawed at him. He feared for his daughters growing up in a world that might never fully accept them. One night, as the family sat together in their living room, a loud crash shattered the peaceful silence. The sound of breaking glass was followed by the acrid smell of smoke. Jack jumped up, racing to the window where a Molotov cocktail had exploded, setting part of their front lawn ablaze. Zara and Alara rushed to the side, their instincts sharpened by years of battle, as security personnel moved in to control the situation. "They've crossed a line," Jack muttered angrily, watching the flames lick the ground outside. Zara, her face tight with fury, nodded. "This was an attack on our family. We cannot let this stand." Alara held their daughters close, her calm demeanor masking the deep anger that simmered beneath. "They want us to be afraid, to retreat." But Jack knew retreat wasn't an option. The world was at a breaking point, and his family had become the flashpoint. He had always believed in the power of diplomacy, of talking things through, but it was becoming clear that words alone might not be enough. Something had to change. The next morning, Jack made a decision. He contacted his government liaison, Sarah Renner, and set up an urgent meeting with high-level officials, determined to push for a permanent solution to the growing unrest. I need to address the United Nations, Jack told Sarah during their call. This isn't just about me and my family anymore. It's about the future of humanity's relations with extraterrestrial life. If we don't make a stand now, things will only get worse. Sarah hesitated for a moment. You're asking for a lot, Jack. But given the situation, it might be the only way to de-escalate this. Jack hung up, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. His decision would either bring them closer to peace or plunge them deeper into chaos. But he had no other choice. A week later, Jack stood on the floor of the United Nations Assembly, the eyes of the world on him. Behind him, Zara and Alara sat, their presence both regal and commanding. His daughters were with trusted friends, safely away from the escalating tensions, but their future was what drove Jack to stand before the global body that day. The room was filled with diplomats, officials, and media from across the globe. The tension was palpable, but Jack felt only resolve. He glanced back at Zara and Alara one more time, drawing strength from their presence before stepping up to the microphone. I stand before you today as a man who has seen two worlds, Jack began, his voice strong but calm. 5 years ago, I left Earth on a mission that should have been simple, but fate took me far beyond anything I could have imagined. I didn't just encounter alien life. I found love, family, and a future that I had never thought possible. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. But my story isn't just about me. It's about what we as a species do next. The arrival of Zara and Alara on Earth is not an invasion, nor is it a threat. It is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to understand that we are not alone in this universe. The assembly was silent, all eyes fixed on him. I know many of you are afraid, Jack continued, afraid of what this means for humanity. But fear cannot be the basis of our decisions. Fear leads to hatred, and hatred leads to violence. We've already seen the consequences of that. My family has been threatened, attacked, simply for existing. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who had doubted him. But let me be clear, my daughters are not a threat. They are the future. And if we want to be part of that future, we need to change how we view the unknown. Zara and Alara's presence behind him added gravity to his words. Jack could see some of the diplomats softening, their skepticism replaced by curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, hope. I stand here today not just for my family, Jack continued, but for every person on this planet who believes that we can do better, that we can move beyond fear and hatred and build a future where differences are not something to be feared, but something to be celebrated. The assembly erupted in quiet murmurs as Jack's words rippled through the crowd. In the years to come, humanity will face many challenges, Jack said, his voice firm. And some of those challenges will come from beyond our world. But if we're going to survive, if we're going to thrive, we have to embrace the unknown. My daughters, born of two worlds, represent that unknown, but they also represent hope. And I ask you, what kind of world do we want to give them? Silence followed his words, the weight of the question hanging over the room. After what felt like an eternity, the General Secretary of the United Nations stood, her voice clear and steady. Captain Harper, your message has been heard, and it is time for humanity to step forward into this new era. The vote that followed was unanimous. Jack's family would be granted full protection, and Zara and Alara's presence on Earth would be officially recognized as a bridge between humans and extraterrestrial life. More importantly, the world was committing to the creation of new policies that would pave the way for peaceful coexistence with any other life forms that humanity might encounter in the future. As Jack stepped down from the podium, Zara and Alara rose to meet him, their eyes filled with pride and gratitude. Together, they had done what many thought impossible. They had changed the world. Back at home that night, as Jack cradled his daughters in his arms, he couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The road ahead would still be difficult. There were no illusions about that. But the foundation had been laid, and for the first time, Jack felt that the world was ready to embrace the future they were building. A future where his daughters, the first of their kind, would grow up not in fear, but in hope. A future where love had triumphed over fear, and where two worlds had come together to create something beautiful. Jack smiled down at his daughters, feeling the warmth of Zara and Alara beside him. We did it, he whispered. and for the first time since his return to Earth, Jack Harper believed that everything would be all right.